Going in here?
Yeah, do you have something that we can scan? Because we'll have some people on Zoom. Do you have anything? Can you give me the handouts and I can scan them and then email them and have them up? So that we can share screen?
That you can do.
That would be good.
I mean, I didn't bring my computer, otherwise I could send you the PDF.
Okay, I can scan them. We can make do. Can definitely get it done. Correct. Thank you.
Yeah.
That works.
Now, I know you wanted this broken into two, but I mean, I'll title them. All and everything. You know,
Yeah.
I get it. But,
It goes fast.
it's all one.
Gotcha. So I just skipped, since this came out sideways, I skipped this slide and just went to the title.
Okay. Done that?
No, thank you. I know others will, donuts. And I don't. They taste great and then they do something like. Do you want me to get, oh, you've got napkins and everything?
I do.
Ready? I was actually, I love what I do.
Years.
Yeah, whatever you like.
All you will need to do, Scott, as you go through is just, this is a touch screen, so you can scroll as you go through the document.
Okay. No problem. You can figure it out.
Hopefully we have people, summer, the beginning of summer is always a fun time.
Yeah,
Kind of like vacations and.
well, I'll be honest, I hate noon. And people should come and interact.
Well, I've got too many, dual career people.
Oh, yeah,
That's-
that's true, that's true. I never really got thought that way.
If
It's just
people
like-
can come, they come, but if they can't, and then I record this so they can watch it later, if they cannot.
Yeah.
We used to make everybody come, but I missed over half of my new agents dual career.
Well, that makes,
Have to accommodate.
yeah. I
There.
didn't, like I said, I never thought it that way, I just, it's just so personal.
Yeah, it's just a tool to be able to get information.
But yeah, no, like I said, that's, you made it very, your careers and all that. You thought, recruiting been
Interesting.
interesting, is that what you said?
Yes, anytime the market's different, people, hear the news and it makes a difference on the quality of people you have applying to get a real estate license.
Yeah, I saw a deal. And I sent it to a couple people on there, sent it to you, forget which state it was now, I'd have to go back and look. But the state has cut a deal, where they're allowing high school seniors to take the pre-licensing courses for real estate for free.
Ah, interesting.
So they can get their real estate.
Huh. We've
I thought
offered,
that was kind of cool.
we've offered discounts in the past. However, good morning, morning, David, morning, Connor.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. However, what I've found is if they don't have money for school, then they don't have money for the dues for KCRAR and plus.
Yeah.
Supra, and so while it's lovely to help people, it's also. Yeah, it takes a chunk of change to get started, not a lot, but for some people, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Sure we have it there. And then I'm gonna share with you guys, online, let me share the screen. Scotland is here from Platinum Title. There we go. Ryan Neal's coming. Okay. Yay, we're getting some people online. Well, you guys are missing out on a wonderful array of donuts that Scott brought today and some fun stuffs like some koozies and notepads and other things from Platinum Title. So I'm sorry you're missing out, but I'm glad you're here for the content. All right, Scott, we've got some scrabblers, so we're gonna go ahead and get started because Scott's got a lot of material to cover this morning. This is Scott Lynn with Platinum Title. Love having you. You guys are amazing partners of our office and you're located right here in our office building. So what I love is Platinum Title, since they're in our building and they're associated with us, they don't mind helping you, especially when you're new. I'm gonna be honest, when you're new, you don't always wanna tell everybody you're new. And working with title people and lenders and not knowing the process and not understanding, it's really nice to know that you can ask and get help and somebody's not gonna look down on you and go, "Oh, new." So that's lovely and wonderful for our new agents. And also to be able to learn about the title commitment. I think it was like barely introduced to me as a new agent. I'd look at it and I'd be like, don't know what I'm looking at. So I did what a lot of agents do, and it's not what you want to hear, but in the beginning, I just kind of didn't look at it because I didn't understand it. However, I didn't understand that I've got to look at it. Yes, professionals are doing the title search and all of that, but I've got to understand what's on there, or at least understand when I need to ask questions.
Sure.
If there's something on there and I'm like, oh, don't know, is that normal? Is that something we should be worried about? We need to know the questions that we should be asking. Come on in, Serenity.
Thanks, Reggie.
And so that's what's so important is understanding the title commitment because it's not a pass. It's not something that you get to ignore just because you don't understand it. You've got to have a basic understanding. You'll never be the expert, and that's okay because we've got experts to be able to turn to and to plug into, like Scott. So Scott, in the brief time that we have before business meeting, is going to take us through the title commitment. Then he's going to come back and do Alta with us, the closing statement, so you can understand that bad boy too, because there's a lot of numbers and columns and items on there that gloss some people's eyes over, and they're just like, oh, that's another document that you must review and look at. You have a responsibility to do that as an agent. And just because you don't understand it, you don't get to just put it aside and go, oh, I'm sure somebody else saw stuff on it. I don't have to worry. No, as agents, we're another set of eyes. So that's really important. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Scott,
Thank
to
you.
educate us on the title commitment. Tell us all things.
I think, first of all, thank you all very much for the opportunity to come here and share with you guys. I tell everybody that there is no dumb question.
No.
The only real dumb question is the one that was never asked, especially if we wait until we get to the settlement date and we're sitting at the closing table and there's an issue. We don't want that. We don't want that to look bad on us. We don't want to look bad on you. We want your customers to understand and to make sure that they clearly have a good idea of what's going on in this whole process. So I think the first thing I should cover, especially if a lot of you are new, and for those of you at home on Zoom, or wherever you are on Zoom, Kristen said this one didn't scan because it's sideways, but I'll show it to you this way. Is what is title insurance? A lot of people don't understand it, don't know why they have to have it, and quite frankly, they don't have to have it. Title insurance is not required, but I'll put it to you this way. I'm looking at buying a lake home for my father-in-law. And so I asked one of our underwriters, I said, do I really need to get title insurance? He's owned it for 15 plus years. I know who's owned it. I know there's been no change in the chain of title. Do I really need it? And he's like, absolutely not. But he said, here's the only problem. If there ever is a claim that comes along and it's a valid claim, if you don't buy title insurance, you're not covered. Your father-in-law was covered, but his coverage ended when he sold the property to you. And he said, so you have no coverage and you're going to lose all your investment in that property. So it's not required, but quite frankly, I wouldn't buy a piece of property without it. I guarantee you, if I do finish this sale or purchase, I'm going to wind up buying title insurance, even though I know the chain of command on the title. Title insurance also is more than just searching the title of the property. We also have to search the district court records for the seller. We have to find out if that seller has judgments or liens. You know, a lot of sellers will say, oh, that's a tax lien. That doesn't affect anything. Yes, it does. It affects their ability to transfer clear title to your new owner, your new buyer, if it's your buyer, or if you're on the listing side, it's their ability to transfer to the buyer. And quite frankly, almost all lenders that I know of require that they get a mortgage policy issued. So if your buyer's getting a loan, they're gonna want that mortgage policy, which we won't issue without issuing the title policy. So, you know, that quite frankly is why, you know, you do wind up having to do title insurance. Now, typically it's paid for by the seller. You know, but that's not necessarily a requirement either. It could be paid for by either party, especially, you know, as we know in today's world with what's happening with all the NAR stuff. That might be something that ultimately could be negotiable, but
I think it was helpful for me when there's a loan, there's usually two title policies. One on the seller side, one on the buyer side, to understand, because I, as a new agent, found it very confusing. Why do we have this? Who's it for? Why?
yeah.
And to understand that you're gonna see it on both sides, because you're gonna get clients, buyers and sellers that are gonna say, why do I have this? And why are we paying for this?
Well, and it's even a more question because our current president has come out and said that he, in efforts to save buyers money on cost, which it's not typically a buyer's cost, he will allow FHA and VA to accept attorney opinions, which is what's done in a few, very few states instead of title insurance. And quite frankly, I will tell you that I've spoken to my brother-in-law who's an attorney. The opinion is his opinion.
Right.
I mean, yeah, maybe you have some kind of recourse against him if it's wrong, but you know, you actually have some coverage
Yeah,
and
this is
insurance
an
policy. So I wouldn't do it with an opinion. I wouldn't do it with anything but absolute regular title insurance. And quite frankly, Christian referenced earlier, we're going to talk in another class about the ALTA. Well, ALTA stands for American Land Title Association. It really is the settlement statement, but if you deal with different title companies besides us, please, I encourage you to make sure they are part of American Land Title Association. Because if they are, then most of these documents that I'm presenting to you today are going to be very standard.
Right.
Because if you look at our documents and you look at that first pages up there, it says ALTA commitment, which means we are a member of them and the people we underwrite through, because how we operate, we're like your local insurance agent. We underwrite policies through Stewart Title, as you can see on this one. We currently do more of our policies through Old Republic because they have a better program than Stewart does. But there's 3 other companies that we also sometimes underwrite through. So it just depends on what's best for your client, especially if it's a commercial deal. Sometimes we'll use a different company. And also Old Republic has a product we're going to start introducing to you guys. I don't like the name of it. They call it the homeowner's policy. But what it is it's an upgrade to a standard title policy where it covers your buyer as their property value increases, the policy increases. Currently, on a standard policy, whatever it's issued for when they purchase that property, that's their coverage. And so if it's a $500,000 property, they're covered for $500,000, but if 3 years from now it's a $600,000 property, they're still only covered at $500,000. But we have this new product through Old Republic that's about $150 to $200 upcharge depending on the price that gives them some extra benefits. That's pretty awesome. So anyway, we'll be introducing that out to you guys. But first, go back to this slide here that you don't have on Zoom, sorry. It just says, what is title insurance? And I think the best way I can explain it to you is to read this to you. It says, title insurance is unlike any other type of insurance. It's protection for your client's most likely biggest investment against something that might have occurred in the past. All other insurance that you purchase, health insurance, auto insurance, homeowners insurance, all of those insurances are for something that could happen in the future. And so you pay usually a monthly premium to buy those, and versus title insurance is a one-time premium that you pay. You pay, again, just one time at the closing, and it covers you for something that could have occurred in the past. And so if someone does come along with a valid claim, then your client is covered and that they won't lose their investment. Because they also don't want to have a mortgage on that property and be able to then have someone say, oh, well, now it's their property and they still owe the mortgage. That's why there's usually a mortgage policy issued at the same time. It also says that to make sure that they just don't lose that investment from that.
So they just pay it at closing, it's just a one-time fee, or is it?
It's a one-time fee that covers them for the life that they own that property. So, yeah, and that's different than any other kind of insurance. All other insurances, again, are for something that happens in the future. And due to that, auto insurance and things like that, if you're female and you're under the age of 30, you're probably rated a little bit higher, but not like a 20-year-old male that, and so they have what they call actuary tables, because all other insurance is betting on that you will have a claim. Okay, and that's why how they rate you and charge you your rates. We're betting on that we did our job right and there is no claim. That's why it's not quite as expensive. It's a one-time premium and it's paid once, because we believe we've done our due diligence. And like I said, we not only search the history of the transfer of the title of that property, but we also try to make sure as best as possible. And that's been difficult lately. You all may have heard of Jackson County most recently, who has cyber attacked. Wyandotte County was first, and then in the Kansas District Court records, that still is not up and running 100%. And so what that means is it affects our ability to log into their systems and search to see if the seller has any judgments or claims against them that wouldn't show up unless it was a claim on the property. And we have to search those kind of things because that does affect their ability to transfer title. So anyways, Kristen, I'm sorry, Serenity, you didn't get it back. What else do you have back? Anyway, so Kristen had graciously scanned these back in for me and then went to this page for you guys on Zoom, which we're going to go to. We're going to skip the album because we're going to do that at another time. This is the jacket. And again, because we're members of the American Land Title Association, this jacket is going to look almost identical no matter what title company you use, as long as they're members of all. And it's the terms and conditions and things like that. And quite honestly, I'm not going to bore you because we have a limited amount of time with reading you terms and conditions. It's something you probably see every time you go to a website and things like that. And it's asking you questions about, do you give them permission for your photos and this, that, and the other? You just click, yeah. So if you're really bored on a rainy day and you want to read the terms and conditions, that's great. I'm going to ask you guys to just skip past that. I'm going to scroll here on the screen for you guys on Zoom, and we're going to get over to the actual part of the commitment that's called a Schedule A. So, yeah, there you go. We're going to get back to what's called the Schedule A. So you guys should be at the top of it. It should say Ultimate Commitment for Title Insurance Schedule A. This is what you guys really need to start looking at and paying attention to when we send you those emails. I don't know how many countless times we get calls later on at closing dates or close to the closing dates and going, that's wrong. My seller's name is this, or it's a different thing for that. And these things, by the way, are all easily fixable and changeable. We have no problem with that. But when we send you out, and that usually comes out about 4 or 5 days after you've sent us the order, we send you this commitment. We'll send you an email asking you to look it over.
Yeah,
And
and
start-
we look it over.
Correct. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through this. I'm going to tell you, things you really should pay attention to. First thing is when you look at this, you want to look really close at the address. We have a lot of, especially in Johnson County, a lot of places, terraces, circles, drives. We don't insure, by the way, the address. We insure the legal description. However, if you've given us an address and you didn't have it right, you had drive and it's actually circle, we could be looking at the wrong legal. So you do need to pay attention to that and make sure when you fill out your contracts that you have the right address. And that it is the drive place, things like that. But again, like I said, these things are all easily fixable and changeable. We just need to make sure we're looking at the right property. You want to look at what the policy amount is. That policy amount on there, in this case, it's $500,000, is going to be what's on your contract that you've given us. So maybe we don't have the latest addendum. There was a change, whether it was up or down or what have you. If you have a change, please send us that addendum.
But you all have to understand, title companies and lenders are not psychic. And so they don't know what happens or changes in your transaction, and anything that changes the numbers, they gotta know. They gotta know. So that means you're not just submitting paperwork in the beginning when it goes under contract. You could be submitting other additional documents during the transaction prior to closing. So don't think that, oh, well, they got the contract. Well, I bet you can't even count how many times at the closing table or the day of closing, you find out, oh, there was an amendment.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh crud, then everybody has to hustle and go into hyper mode to try to get this taken care of. And sometimes you're having to sign amendments at the closing table because something was missed because an agent forgot to send the documents to all the parties that need to know. So it's your job to make sure everybody's got what they have. You're like the conductor. You are the project manager, even though there's so many people in this transaction, but you've got to oversee and make certain. Don't assume that the other agent got it either to them.
No, correct, absolutely. And things like the proposed insured, if they're getting a loan policy, if they're actually on a loan and the amount. A lot of times people have changed loan companies, especially now as rates are going up and down and, you know, they may have found a better deal. That's okay. You know, but we need to know that if your buyers decided to go with a different lender. Or if they change the loan amount, maybe they're paying their own commission and they're letting them build it into that price of the house. And so you got that addendum and they're gonna have a little higher loan. You know, all that thing, like I said, everything on here is easily correctable and fixable and can be done. If you're the listing agent, please pay close attention to where it says who's vested in title. In this case, it's Charlie Brown and Lucy Van Pelt, if anyone knows who those people are. By the way, everything on this form, if you want to look through this on your own leisure time and go back through this, are real live issues. These are actual valid commitments. We changed the name. If anyone, 20 points for if you know who Charlie and Lucy are. It basically is the Peanuts game. But anyway, but the biggest thing on here, I was at a closing not too long ago. Matter of fact, it was down at the old Plaza office. And the seller was sitting there to sign, and I said, "Where is Manuel?" And they're like, "Well, why? He doesn't own this property." I said, "Well, are you married?" "Yeah, but I bought this property before we were married." And I go, "It doesn't matter, he has to sign." And seller was not happy, very unhappy, because Manuel was actually in Texas. And they got married on a whim in Vegas, hadn't been together in months, and so anyway, but they were still married, so.
Takes one to buy and two to sell.
Correct.
Married couple.
Please remember that.
Remember that, just because they bought it before they were married, that spouse has a marital right in that property. And so they can't just say, "Oh, no, it's mine."
Well, and here's the flip side. I had to go meet with a soon-to-be ex-wife, not current ex-wife, to get her to sign the mortgage
Oh,
for the soon-to-be ex-husband's new home, and she didn't want to sign it.
of course not, because she's still.
Because she kept saying, "I'm not obligating myself to pay back any kind of loan," but here was the problem. They're still married. If that divorce decree has not been finalized by the court, they're still married, whether they're sellers or whether they're buyers.
That's a good point.
And this was the same thing on the buy side. And she had to sign that mortgage. And I tried to explain to her, the mortgage did not obligate her to absolutely anything. All the mortgage allowed her to do was give up a lien on any interest at all that she might have in that property. It's kind of like a quitclaim deed.
Yeah.
But she didn't want to sign it. So they couldn't close and there was 2 other deals going down behind this.
I haven't even met
And then,
here.
you know, and that was on Friday night at 6:30, so it's just like, I mean,
So if there's a divorce, you have to make sure, if they say, hey, I'm gonna go find a house, I am not gonna be living in my old house anymore. Well, if, like Scott said, if the divorce is not final,
now, if that buyer was paying cash, he could have went ahead and purchased. This was only because he was getting a new loan, then the current wife, the soon-to-be ex-wife, had to sign, because she had an interest.
Can the buyer, soon to be ex-wife, could she have signed away her marital rights to that property? Is that?
It got worked out, with her attorney,
But if it was
she went ahead and signed, and then, because they finally understood. I don't know the answer to that question, I could find that out.
I think you can, but the soon-to-be ex has to sign something that, giving up their marital rights.
Yeah, in
to
this
that
particular
property.
case, I know the lender was pushing that they wanted the mortgage.
It was probably.
So it wasn't us pushing that, just so you know that, guys. That's why I said if he was a cash buyer, he could have bought and went on down the road, because it only takes one to buy.
Yep.
Okay,
Buy two to
and then
sell.
he would have been up for any interest she made a claim later on, that would have been up on him. But anyway, so moving on, just want to make sure it's right, make sure we got the names right. The other thing on here, I see more and more and more trusts.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, guys, if it's the trust, the trustees, whoever they are, has to sign. And if one of the trustees has passed, we have to have a certified copy, which means an original death certificate. Okay? Well, we have to know that there's only one trustee now. We have to have a complete copy of their trust.
So when you go to take a listing and they say, oh, we've got it in a trust, you tell them before you take that listing, I have to have a copy of the.
But we have to send that, by the way, to our underwriter, in this case, it's Stewart on here, but it's Old Republic mostly now. And they have to make sure we're dealing with the right people who have the rights to convey title.
And you'd think that that's not an issue, but there are people and families who take over, and not always in a bad way. There can be a family member who just takes charge of everything, and their names may not be on those trust documents. And so they really don't have the authority to move forward. And you're gonna assume because everybody in the family's letting them do that, well, that's okay. Well, so taking the listing, you want the trust documents up front. Same with the buyer, if a buyer's gonna be buying in a trust. You want those documents in advance. Do not wait.
No.
Too many agents.
Same thing with power of attorneys, if they say, well, I have a power of attorney to sign, we have to, again, get all those documents vetted and they all have to be recorded, things like that, and it's a $260 fee to record, a power of attorney.
Well, and again, you'll be surprised how many times there'll be parties to the transaction that really don't have the legal right to
Yeah.
represent.
The other big thing we run into is it's Serenity selling the property and it's in Charlie and Lucy's name. And she said, well, that was my grandma and grandpa. And, they died and they gave me the property. Well, did you go through probate? Do you have court documents that show you're now the rightful owner of this property? Because even if they had a will in Missouri, all wills have to be probated. And probate for everybody, especially in Kansas, could be up to 90 days. Missouri could be up to 6 months.
Yeah.
I mean, so these are all things as listing agents, y'all, like Kristen was saying, need to make sure when you're talking with them and sitting down and going over, what's going on. When you get this, especially if you haven't already done that at the listing time, make sure it's matching up.
Something I do just preliminary is I go on to MLS and I'll go into RPR or Realist and I'll see how does it show who holds title. Because if it's not matching the people I'm meeting with, then I want to know, and it could be exactly the scenario that Scott talked about. So we've got to make certain before I'm going to list this house, that we have clarity and the documentation that allows them to sell this house. It's going to happen to you more than once. And you'll think, oh, well, we gotta get this, do not get so eager to list that house that you don't have all of that nailed down.
Next thing on here then is the actual legal. Like I said, we insure the legal address, not property address. And so make sure that at the top, we've got the correct legal description going on. And by the way, you may not have the full legal description, because if you pulled it out the Johnson County tax records or Jackson County, they abbreviate everything. Okay, so don't be too worried about it. It's not as detailed as it's on here, but just make sure we're talking about, in this case, lot 29 in block 4 of Nevermore.
And don't assume that the listing agent has a brain.
Yeah, yeah.
Please, please, please don't assume that the legal description they have down there is correct. Do a double, that you've got to be checking everything. Even when you don't know exactly what you're checking, you gotta be checking and asking questions.
All right, well, we're moving up to part B, next page. And part B, if you're the listing agent, you really need to pay attention to this, okay? Because these are the requirements for us. In order for us to issue a policy, we have to satisfy these requirements. And so these are things that must be taken care of. And items 1 through 5, quite frankly, are all pretty standard. You know, as far as no matter which title company you're dealing with, again, if they're members of the ALTA, and it's just things like, you know, they have paid the agreed amount of interest, a state or interest to be insured, so they got to pay us. Otherwise, we won't issue a policy if we're not paid. I mean, so they're all pretty standard things. They pay the premiums, you know, and things like that. Number 5. You know, the public records reveal the following information regarding conveyances status. Again, just making sure that we got the right sellers, and those are the right people selling the property there. Number 6, properly executed deed from Charlie and Lucy, vesting fee simple title. Again, one of the things that comes up a lot of times is you've written down Bill and Elizabeth, or Bill and Liz on things, and, you know, send us docs. And they're actually Robert and Elizabeth, things like that, but just make sure we got the right people. My grandfather, his real name was Vernon. He went by Pete. He signed checks, everything was Pete. His brother, his real name was Clyde, but he went by Shorty. I mean, they all went by different names, and I'm just like, you know, and so just make sure we're dealing with the right people when you're looking through here. That's what we're asking for you on here. Properly executed mortgage to Peppermint Patty. A single person and spouse for the proposed insured, that's the buyer. Again, Robert and Elizabeth, if that's who we're gonna have on our docs, probably, make sure it's not Bob and Liz on yours. Because one thing else to remember, and I say this all the time, we have to match our documents to what your contract says legally. And so if you've got Bob and Liz on the contract, we are gonna have Bob and Liz on here. And honestly, I was at a closing about 2 months ago, where Dr. Michael was there, and all of our documents said Mike, and he wouldn't sign.
Yeah.
He said, I don't sign anything as Mike. Everything is Michael. And he was very adamant about it. So we fixed it, you know, but again, this is at the closing table, and we don't want that. Guys, we're here to serve you and your client, and we want this to be the happiest day of their lives. We want everything to go smoothly, and we want you to look good, that you've chosen us as the vendor, and we want everybody to just be so excited.
Because if you have these snafus, this can taint the experience.
Yeah.
This is the last image they have of working with you.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, at least from my experience, majority of the time, those snafus are usually an agent not getting information to the title.
Well, it's just not paying attention. Again, we send these out to you within a week.
Yeah.
Of when you've given us the orders and the contracts. And so it's like, you know, I mean, just look it over. If you need to print it out, look it over. If you want us to print it out for you, we'll print it out. Just come down the hall if you're in this office, you know, we'll be glad to get you that stuff.
But just because you don't understand it, or if
You find it confusing is no excuse to ignore it. It just means you have to build that knowledge, and that's why it's lovely to have platinum title right here in this book.
Yeah. Item 8 is a release of the recorded mortgage with Charlie Brown and Lucy Van Pelt from Electronic Registration Systems Inc. It's solely for Endeavor Capital. Guys, mortgages get sold all the time. They may have originated this loan with one lender and now it's being serviced by another lender. And quite frankly, that lender may be out of business. So again, when you see this, make sure you're talking to the seller. Okay, do you have this lien? Sellers go, well, that was just an old line of credit and I don't have that anymore. You know, I went to sell my house at 23 years. I had a old business I had a line of credit with the bank. It was no longer in existence. So there was no way to get that release of that mortgage, you know, because it was there, but there was no amount to it. There was no payoff because the bank closed. I mean, it was out of business. And so, I mean, it's just things like that that have to be cleared up and the seller may honestly just forgot about it.
Don't you
You know.
find the longer they've been in a house, the more this?
Well, that or what we found, I mean, quite honestly, if they're more affluent sellers, they'll say, well, that's not a mortgage on my house. I got a loan. I bought a boat last year. Well, they got a lien on mortgage on their house, but they got better terms because they put it as a second on their house to buy the $50,000 boat, because boats aren't cheap anymore. And they didn't quite understand and grasp all the things they were signing at the time, but instead of an actual lien on the boat, it was a lien on the house. Or they may have put in, you know, new windows, you know, and right now, oh, no, you know, no payments for a year, and things like that, but there's still a lien, you know,
There's
so.
no way they're gonna get their.
Yeah, so just pay attention to that, guys. It was, the next one, number 9, again, understand, these are real things we've come across. Satisfaction and release of judgment against Charlie Brown in the favor of Linus Van Pelt in the amount of $1 million. This was a $300,000 house. And he had a $1 million judgment against him. Okay? He's like, oh yeah, well, that was a business deal that I was involved in with my partner and we worked out an arrangement and doesn't matter. We gotta have a release from Linus. So, because that property is tied up until we know, and it was all worked out, but, and the agent felt embarrassed and didn't want to call him and say, hey, you know, we can come up with this $1 million judgment. Trust me, if you got $1 million judgment against you, you know it's there. And the seller knew, he's like, yeah, I got it worked out, and so the guy was willing to take a $50,000 payment out of the proceeds and sign a release because it is one of many things he had a judgment on.
I had the exact same thing happen on a $350,000 house. Get ready for close. It was a cash offer. It was quick. The manager asked me, did you know there were liens on this property? I'm like, no. She said, well, to the tune of $600,000. You know, it's us also knowing what to ask our sellers. Are there any liens? Do you think there could be any business liens, especially if you know they're a business owner, to this property? Because, and he said the same thing, oh, those are business liens. And luckily, he said, he goes, my attorney will take care of it. He went to Topeka, took care of it, and we did it. But, oh my God, when she said, did you know? And I'm like, no. I was like, oh, this is not good, this is not good.
Well, back to my case, because mine was a business lien for business. I used my home to guarantee it. I had to go through the FDIC because they had actually closed that bank down. But again,
Did we get cut off?
I think so. I think they lost the room. Yeah, I saw their signal just watching it. I used to work for Zoom. So Lily was just watching their signal and I just saw it drop. It's like, yeah. they lost internet in the office. So that's fine. Hey, we showed up. We've already been here for 30 minutes. We get the credit. I've written notes. Yeah. Most important things are said in the first 10 minutes. So
Are we still being recorded?
nope.
See the record button up
Yeah, they
there.
are. Yep. That should then appear on their Facebook.
It is
I would
actually
imagine.
that somehow that they want to build a lien now on the property, that does come up, you know, I mean, they need to know, what's going on, and they may be inactive, you know? Same thing with property taxes, that's the next thing on here, you know, payment for all assessed properties after prior years. Most people do not understand that the taxes they just paid in May were for last year. I just paid my taxes. No, you didn't. Those were for last year. And where this comes up typically with the sellers, not that they weren't paid, when we're going through this, we're walking them through the charges on the settlement statement. They're like, well, what do you mean the tax? Well, you know, they didn't understand that that was for last year. Taxes are always paid in arrears. But you want to make sure as the listing agent, when you're looking at this, that we've got, again, the right parcel, the right taxes, you know, and all of that. Special assessments to Lawrence, you know, again, we're getting into just some pretty basic requirements and things like that, filing fees, things like that. So, you know, the only things too you want to look at on here, if there are any, when I see special assessments, is making sure that for their buyer, if you're a buyer's agent, that there's no specials that weren't accounted for, that the seller didn't have to mention because they're putting in new sidewalks, you know, and they decided to assess everybody. I just got a $500 some assessment for a pool that would be redone. Now that was through my homes association, not the city, but you know, our pool needed some major work done, so they had to reassess everybody $500. You know, and that was out there. So you just want to make note of those kind of things, and
I had it happen, because, in Johnson County, they bundle it with the property taxes, usually special assessments, for sidewalks and that type of thing. In Jackson County, they don't, they assess you separately. And so I've had it where a seller forgot to tell that there was a major sidewalk assessment coming up. And we were able to find it out before closing, but that again is not information you want.
all right, it should be a Schedule B Part 2, where we're going to next, on the next. Got that? All right, except Zoom, sorry about that. Anyway, these are our exceptions to the policy. This is what we're not doing. Okay? And again, the first section of this are standard exceptions, you know, any defect, lien, encumbrance, adverse claims that appears for the first time on public records. You know, rights, claims, parties in possession not shown on the record. I mean, we can't insure things we don't know about. If somebody wasn't notified, it was an actual rightful heir, you know, things like that later on. Special exceptions are ones you want to really look at. Taxes for 2023 and subsequent years, future installments levied by the city, building setback line. Number 10, if you're the buyer's agent, okay? Easement, Kansas City Tire and Light, both recorded on page 131.46, okay? If your buyer loves this property because the way it's laid out, and I'll give you a real live example of this, they wanted to put their $2.3 million horse farm right under the Kansas City Power and Light overhead high tension power line. Kansas City Power and Light said, "Oh no, you're not going to put that metal building there." And the buyer was not happy. That's the only reason they bought this property. Was that it's going to have their beautiful horse farm. They wound up being able to put it somewhere else on the property, but again, not what is happening. You know, this is a, you know, an exception that they weren't aware of, and when they went to get their building permit, they've already bought the property now, guys, and told no. Another instance we had, wanted to put their pool in the backyard. Figured they would lay out just perfect. Gas line going right where their pool was. And they weren't too happy about saying, yeah, you can go ahead and put that pool right where that gas line is. So they couldn't do it.
Happened to my husband, he was buying a flip house and, it's very interesting. The sellers didn't want to go through an agent and wanted to sell it, off market. He found out that there was a gas line in a place where it made it impossible to expand that house and put an addition on because of the gas line. And he believes they knew about it, and that's one of the reasons he was a cash buyer, and, yeah. But
Yeah, I mean, another example that come up was, lady bought the house because the previous seller had the greenest thumb of anyone, beautiful flower garden out front, around the mailbox, between the sidewalk and, the street or her yard and everything. City of Lawrence come along, tore it all out with a bulldozer and put in new sidewalks. And the buyer's like, what the?
Yeah.
Well, there was an easement there, that said, you put it there, but we're gonna tear it out if we have to. And that's what happened. And again, this is after the fact, so it comes back, against them. So anyway, just continuing on, you got your terms and provisions there. The next. Oh,
Yeah,
that's not
I've
on.
lost
That's all right.
it.
The next page on.
they're on watching you on my phone.
Oh, that's fine.
But they
Well, the
can't.
next page, the next page is continuation of those exceptions. I like to cover this page because it's mineral rights. Now, this is not going to affect many of you probably on Zoom or in this room, because it's not a rural property, but just keep in mind, the seller may not be selling the mineral rights to that property. They may be retaining them because it does have oil and gas wells on them. There are a few of those here in the city.
Yeah.
That have natural gas wells. I know of a couple in this area and over in Shawnee, and, whether the seller is selling those or not, it's part of the contract you need to make sure you're aware of. But that's not something typically you're gonna run into that you're even asking about in this area. But if it's a rural property, for sure. Definitely need to make sure you're working on whether there's mineral rights that are being transferred or not. So, well, that's pretty much everything on here. We're about running out of time. These last few pages, the privacy notices, as Todd Lynch, our lead examiner, says, he's never read these in the 40 years he's been in this business. It's just a privacy notice of what they do and don't do with your information. It's really letting their buyers know, and they sign a form again at closing that just says that they're allowing us to release their information to you all. So in other words, when we send you guys a copy of the settlement statement in advance, that's really their private information, but you're saying, yeah, it's okay that you're sharing that with all parties that have interest in the transaction. And that's really what this says, but you want to, again, on a rainy day, read the bill.
Well, I do want to tell you, although we don't print out many materials, just know you have a duty to protect that privacy. So if you're, printing up a time commitment or a closing statement in Malta, and you leave that out and about, that's information you're not supposed to leave out and about.
No, you guys, one thing I'll caution everybody on, Gmail, Yahoo, whatever. I use a Gmail account myself at home, but understand I used to say people, but really it's not even people. It's bots, computer programs out there that do nothing but scour the internet for information that's being transferred that talks about real estate transactions and what's going on. And I have personally filed 4 different police reports in the last few years, here locally, where people have intercepted information, turned around and changed the wiring instructions. Looked like it come from Platinum Title, and it'll still say it came from Scott Lynn, but it'll say Scott at Platinum's XYZ instead of PlatinumTitleLLC.com, and they'll change where the money's being sent to. Just understand that it is sensitive with this information, and don't be sharing it randomly or what have you, and making sure whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, if anyone is asking your client for wire money one way or the other, always make sure we tell everyone, even when we send them wiring instructions, to call us and verify that it came from us, because people will intercept those. And like I said, I filed 4 different police reports. I'm not talking to a guy who said $350,000 on a cash transaction.
It happens and it's devastating. Imagine wiring your full down payment.
And in
or
most
a
cases, it's
cash.
not recoverable.
Yeah.
You
It's gone.
have told that bank to send this money to this account, and
They're
you
not
send-
liable because you gave them
You know, the
authorization.
cash one I just spoke of, I got their money back because the local bank allowed whoever these fraudsters were to actually open an account in Platinum Title LLC's name without asking for any corporate documents, any.
Ooh, not good. So wire fraud is a real thing.
It's a real thing.
Don't think it's not gonna happen to you or your clients, or them being susceptible, or you being susceptible. I mean, so always be, when it has to do with the transfer of money, verify, verify, verify. Again, luckily, they're in our office. You could literally just walk over there and say, is this real? Is it
But the
okay?
biggest thing is for your clients.
Yeah.
Tell them to always call whoever is asking them to send them money and verify the information. You know, please do that. Now, on a lighter note, on earnest money, you can text us. We're the only title company in the entire area that your clients can text earnestly. Okay?
Cool.
And they're really not texting. What they're doing is texting the word PAYEM, which is short for pay earnest money. Okay? And they're getting a secure link to a secure website, well, a link to a secure website that allows them to upload. You may say, well, I don't know if that's really important or not. Well, I will tell you this. I have 3 adult male children, 2 of which own homes. Okay? They all have checking accounts, but not a single one of them has checks.
No,
So they cannot physically write an earnest money check. Now, they could go to a bank, well, but 2 of them bank at banks that are now virtual banks.
yeah, so they
Okay,
can.
so getting a counter check is very difficult. But anyway, they can actually just go text the money right out of their account and send it to us. Other cool thing about that, if you'll use that system, and you can do it for your client. I had a client for an agent call me from South Dakota who was pheasant hunting last year. In a panic on a Saturday, called my cell and said, my $3,000 money has to be in today and I'm not pheasant hunting and I don't know how I can get that to you. And I'm like, well, you got cell service, do you have internet access? And he said, well, I think so. I said, well, as soon as you get off the phone with me, text PAYEM to this phone number. It'll send you a link, you can upload it on the spot. So he sent his earnest money from some field in South Dakota. And the other cool thing is it asks them for their information, their property address. We get checks all the time slid under the door, dropped off with no contract. We really don't know what to do with it, but if you use the online system, it asks for the property address and all the information. So we actually start a file, an order file, and get everything rolling ahead of time. So as soon as we get your contract.
Well, just know, that's a good point, just as we're wrapping up, is when you're a buyer's agent and you've got an earnest deposit and they are not gonna do anything with that until they have the contract.
Right.
They're not gonna do anything. It won't get deposited until they have the contract. Okay, so don't think, oh, we got it in on time. Well, not if they don't have the contract. So again, you gotta know what you're responsible for.
And you can
and
upload
when.
your contract to that system. Last thing I'll leave you with is, we're here to serve you and your clients. We're the most flexible company in town. You know, I met some people yesterday at the tavern, weren't drinking, I said they can't drink. At the tavern restaurant in Mills Farm,
Yeah.
Michigan.
Yeah.
To close the cellar, because they were trying to do a buy at the same time. And, matter of fact, they came in later that afternoon to our office to close on their buy, but there were some issues going on and they were trying to get those resolved, and so they couldn't make it to the office, so I went to them. I, as the marketing guy, just because of my background, all I've ever done is real estate, guys. I got a real estate license back in 1979. And so everything I've ever done is all real estate related. But I do about 10 closings a week. Most of them are senior living centers. One other thing on senior living centers, just real quick. Make sure if your seller has some kind of diminished capacity that something has been legally done to take care of that too, because I've had some people where I've sat down at the closing table and they said, oh, my husband has Alzheimer's.
And you're like,
And, I'm like, well, I have to, can they explain back to me that they understand what they're signing? They don't, they can't sign. So, but anyway, I'm just saying, we're the most flexible in town. We'll go anywhere. We don't charge extra for that. The only time we charge extra is if we have to hire a remote. So whatever you need, my cell phone, if you all pick up any of my information, is on my card. I'll answer it anytime, day or night.
thanks,
You know.
appreciate it,
Thanks-
Scott.
Thanks for the time.
Good information, appreciate it. Sorry, you guys on Zoom that we got cut a little short on, at least on. I'll upload it and put it on the Facebook page, so you guys will have access to that. Okay, getting ready for business meeting, thanks.